the private industry. Smedley Butler was correct. He says that the military is being used as the ability to both collect private corporate debt and to open up new business opportunities for private industry. Certainly General Petraeus had expressed this, and he's now the head of the CIA. He wouldn't go in, trained by Georgetown, the Jesuits. He said he wouldn't go anywhere in the military without his battery of attorneys to make private contractual deals that ended up with private contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, yeah, I mean, Smedley Butler's war as a racket continues. As to solutions, I think it's important to vote. I disagree entirely with those Christians who say render under Caesar that which is Caesar. We got rid of the king. We got rid of the Pontifex Maximus. We no longer have a pope or a king. We the people, and it's our government, and we got our rights from God, not from any flesh and blood person.
Now, your website is Sovereign Home Rule Within, but there over the last 2 or 3 years, they have been doing the same thing to sovereigns that they did to the militia. They're trying to demonize sovereigns. Oh, there was a sovereign in Arkansas that was killed a cop. There was, they've tried to demonize sovereigns. Have you felt any backlash from that?
Well, I operated at a different nexus. I'm operating within the judicial system. Everything I do is right up in their face. I have no secrets. What I do privately is exactly what they know I'm doing publicly. So I'm very public, and it's important that there be no secrets. And that matter of fact, I'm going to be on Eric John Pelt's program tonight at 5 Eastern, and discussing this very issue. Phelps and I are adamant that the question of a sovereign individual is a chimera, and it's not. You cannot be a citizen in the United States and be totally sovereign, so that unless you've got an Indian reservation or you're an Amish and you're there with some sort of irrevocable trust structure. You're in a monastery someplace as a member of the Catholic Church where you're essentially protected as a sovereign, so to speak. But that the latest arrest down in Louisiana, the shootout in Louisiana, people have been convinced that somehow they can avoid any role as a citizen. And my position is that you can't be we the people unless you're in charge of the government. And to be in charge of the government, you must be a 100% practicing citizen in charge of things and take charge. The police work for you, the military work for you, government works for you, and that's the attitude that I take and people around me take. And so that's the difference between me and the sovereign. I've got friends who haven't had a driver's license, continue to refuse to get a driver's license, and they live on the lam, so to speak. They live very much off the edge, and they're not taking responsibility as citizens. And I have a number of people who I've worked with now for close to 8 years, so I know these people personally, and I know friends of mine who are my associates are speaking with these people and trying to solve a lot of their problems, and understanding that we the people is actually the citizens who take responsibility and direct control. So it's a play. I think that certainly individual action is always problematic when the individual has to go up against the government. The only way you do it is to be rich and run for office.
And there's a little backlash on that, because I've been in presidential campaigns. I've worked with presidential candidates, and they never even got on TV because they wanted to abolish the Federal Reserve, and pointed out that their charter's up next year, so that ought to be fairly easy to do if you had anybody honest in Congress. But Congress has all been bought and paid for by the banksters.
Right, the charter is up next year, and all this prattle by Ron Paul, which is all, just, he never told anybody that it was a 100-year charter. Well, as it stands now, the Federal Reserve, they don't need us anymore. They control all the money. And the Red Chinese government is now a member of the Federal Reserve, so the Chinese are happy. They don't need the United States.
Now, when did the Chinese buy into the Federal Reserve? How did that happen?
Well, Hillary Clinton went over and essentially was trying to resolve the investment in sovereign derivatives, and that she had promised that the real property underlying the derivatives would be turned over, and that they would be able to resolve that if they were to be, if the Red Chinese Bank would become a member of the Federal Reserve, that's Deutsche Bank or Citibank or JP Morgan or Wells Fargo. So in May, they essentially, their sovereign status as the Red Chinese government was lowered, just like the Vatican Bank's sovereign status was lowered when it joined the European Central Bank's coins. And so now the Red Chinese are very vulnerable to the sort of audits that Deutsche Bank is by the Federal Reserve and others. So, yeah, their bookkeeping methods are highly questionable.
Is this the Libor scandal? I've had that up on my website. We're talking about, and they're actually starting to arrest bankers in some parts of the world.
Well, the LIBOR, the fixing of the interest rates on all of these derivatives, one of the interests of setting up Dodd-Frank was to force many of these calculations that had been done in New York over to London. And that when you see what happened to Lehman Brothers, their London contingency was shut down so that they had no handle in London anymore. And the banking scandal essentially transferred operations to London, and they were able to do the manipulation of the interest rate on a daily basis, a fixing of the interest rate on the derivatives, on the mortgage structures, in a way which was eluding the real property owners paying the mortgages on a monthly basis. So, as it turns out, it's very interesting that the computer engineer, the software designer and mathematician who developed the programs to study an algorithm which studied the LIBOR rate fixing, is the father of this fellow Holmes, who they found sitting in the car in Colorado. And it just so happened that his father was to testify a week and a half after the supposed shootout occurred in Colorado, in Aurora. And as it turns out, I believe there were two separate shooters inside the theater, because they found a second gas mask, and that he was in fact drugged in a psychological drug treatment program with a psychiatrist who, as part of his study, he was doing a study with drugs. Just like Hinckley was involved in that whole end of things, his father being a national NSA executive who was having lunch, by the way, with H.W. Bush at the time of the shooting of Reagan. But that Holmes, the father, had actually uncovered the scandal with his crawler program doing the studies on the rate fixing of the LIBOR rates. So what I'm talking about is not the LIBOR rates, although that is front and center. What I'm saying is that, and they were profiteering, what I'm saying is that the Chinese government wanted to be, because the Chinese had ceased buying our treasuries, they were buying gold, just as the Indians were buying gold over the last 2 years, and that they were threatening to dump their treasury bonds. and there had to be a way that Geithner and Clinton could entice them to not only hold on to their bonds, but to buy more. Right now, the Federal Reserve is buying all of the Treasury bonds, and when its charter is up, it will own all of the currency that we will then have to use as like an IMF conditionality, so that we will be just as bad off as the Argentines were in the early 90s. And unless we're going to start a new currency separate from the Federal Reserve, and I think we could probably do that because we have huge local resources.
You know, I'm looking for answers. I mean, what you're talking about with these international bankers, they've been in power for 100 years easily. Longer than that if you count the British. The sun never sets on the British Empire. And, you know, for 25 years I've been reporting on this, Chris. I've come up with an answer years ago, and maybe that's where they tried to, after I put this in the centerfold of my magazine, talked about something called Liberty Villages, suddenly I was involved in an accident and kept unconscious for 3 months.
When was this?
2004, May 20th, 2004. I made the mistake of using my AT&T cell phone to call home and ask my son, where do you need me to go next, son? An accident was arranged, and I was hospitalized for 4 months. Ran up a $750,000 hospital bill for 3 broken ribs.
For 3 broken ribs?
Yes, sir.
My God.
This was after I referred to, I put building number 7 on the cover. My magazines were 20,000 copies a month were going out, and suddenly the brakes were put on by the accident. You know, now they said I had a serious head injury. They said I had a serious brain injury, but I've been tested by psychiatrists, doctors, and lawyers, and guess what? Nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with my IQ, nothing wrong with my memory, nothing wrong with nothing here. Physically, other than, and by the time I woke up, all of my ribs had healed.
Well, it sounds like you still talk a lot.
I still talk a lot. I still talk a lot. And I wrote a book about that. We got a book about that. It's called Mystery Babylon: The New World Order Unveiled. But we're really moving on now, you know, because I've been reporting on this and nothing's changed. We've seen, you know, one administration come, a Republican and a Democrat. I mean, come on, this is 2 wings of the same bird. It's always flying, and the bird, folks, ain't an American eagle. It's a global vulture.
Well, the eagle is a vulture. You know, it's in that same family.
Of course.
But I was making a joke. I heard your chihuahua bark. I was saying that you bark.
I got 3 of them sitting around here being spectators. Yes, sir.
Well, they're well behaved. So, look, I think that I can go through and name names, and I think it's important to name names. One of the important parts of understanding the power that London had and has is its deal that was made under King Richard and King John during the time of the Crusades with the Pope, who essentially loaned the money to bail out England, and in effect there was a tithing being paid every year against the English national debt that accrued during King Richard's involvement in the Crusades. And as that reign became one of the preeminent Catholic families and continues to this day, that there really is no difference in the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church. It's the same rituals, the same masses. The only difference is that the Queen or the King, coming off of Henry VIII, who still killed Protestants, he wanted to be the Pope. And his battle was he wasn't going to pay his tithing and his payment program to the Pope until he was going to get a proper divorce. And that my position is that all of the worshipful masters organizations, the various liveries that were set up in the City of London, were chartered by the Catholic Church, and that they remain today they remain the hands and feet of that global operation, both in every aspect of commerce, the entire commerce trade, from pharmaceuticals to livery cabs on the street, to meat packing, to all the commodities. There's close to 150 organizations which essentially control commerce and have been put in place by the Pope directly. And if you look at the charters, that's all available on Wikipedia. Just look up the worshipful masters and their organizations, and it's close to 110 organizations that pretty much control world commerce, all shipping, etc. If you want to deal with the insurance industry, you're dealing with them. You want to deal with the pharmaceutical industry, you're dealing with them. Anything like the dentists, the doctors, all of these organizations. I recently saw there's interesting popular movies which portray this. One of them, I forgot the name of the thing, but was a satirical piece on the battle in the Regency period in England between the two main medical schools of how to get cadavers to experiment with, and they had no funeral services for picking up the dead, and they ended up essentially snatching bodies and selling them to the various surgical schools. But evidently it's true, and it was true until this day, that these organizations that operate out of London, in effect, are licensed by the Vatican, the Catholic Church. And that's a matter of public record. I'm not speculating. It's well established.
Well, didn't the Rothschilds take over the handling the funds for the Catholic Church a long time ago?
Yeah, look up, forgot the guy's initial name. He was a gold merchant. He was a goldsmith.
Bauer.
And his name was Bauer.
Jack,
Bauer.
yes.
And he wanted to get a leg up. He wanted to increase his business, so he had a red shield out in front of his gold shop as a goldsmith, and he was in competition, a lot of competition, and he took the name of the red shield, which had a double-headed eagle on it, and which is Rothschild, and which is essentially a Catholic name. It is also the coat of arms of the Palpatine family, who had their first pope in the 1100s, and they were the traders to the Lombardy League of Venice, and essentially were traders to Venice, and were thrown out of the Lombardy League and end up in business with the Habsburg family, who, if you look at the Palpatine family, they have the double-headed eagle as their coat of arms, and exactly the same coat of arms as the Rothschilds. Well, as it turns out, the Palpatine family are very importantly integrated into the banking industry through the Habsburgs in Austria and Switzerland, and that the Swiss essentially are, in exchange for their Swiss guards, to guard the Pope, are forever guaranteed neutrality because of their army guarding the Pope. So there's a quid pro quo there. But yes, the Bauer family from 1765 became the Rothschild family in service of the Holy Roman Empire, and it was not until Waterloo that they actually got a leg up into high society, when they became the principal controllers of the Dutch East India Company, which is, of course, that was Hamilton. Hamilton was married into the Rensselaer family, the Dutch Rensselaer family in Upper New York. His wife, I think, was Mary, who was the daughter of Rensselaer, who was the co-founder and one of the principals of the Dutch East India Company. And that it thrived, but it was in competition with the British, and it ended up being sold out and put under the control of the Rothschilds after 1814. So the Dutch essentially were subsumed. Of course, the Dutch were in constant battle as Protestants with the Holy Roman Empire. So I don't see that London is anything other than sort of the hands and feet of the business arrangements which were chartered by the old latifundist families of old Rome, just like the Delano family was Roosevelt, FDR's mother's name. She was the Catholic end of things, and that she was the amalgam of the Dutch and with the Catholic made FDR president. And that certainly, if you look at his cousin, Teddy Roosevelt, you know, it was a different branch of the family. They were all involved in opium and basic commodities in business with the various chartered worshipful masters who controlled commerce.
Now, I've asked, let me years ago, Chris, I wrote a book about a return of a Messiah here, and the abolishing of all laws against victimless crimes across America, most of the states. And I've said, made the comment on the show many times, if a man with a badge can walk up to you and say, what's that in your pocket, son? Then you live in a police state. If you can be arrested, and we've had people arrested like Lakin for just disagreeing, and we've had millions of people arrested for plans of renown that is talked about in the Bible. You know, what about if a man with a badge can walk up to you and arrest you, put you in jail for a plant? Don't we have a problem with a police state?
Well, the problem is that to speak to the policeman, you're entering into a contract. All you have to say is that I don't know you, I don't wish to do business with you, have a nice day. Basically, you've got to acknowledge that they're doing business with you, and that's an interesting way of approaching it. In other words, if they work for you, you can say to them that you do not wish to do business with them. And
we have a matter of fact, I got a story that I had pulled up, and the gentleman is a radio talk show host also. His name's Doug Hagman. He said, if you're an outspoken Christian in America, you need to be concerned. If you're an outspoken Christian in America who happens to be a gun owner, you need to be very concerned. And if you're a Christian gun owner who disagrees with the progressive anti-Christian agenda in America and have a platform to inform others, you better believe that you are under intense scrutiny. Sound like paranoid propaganda?
No, it's true.
Yeah, he says the one thing is that there's a war against Christianity and an active agenda to disarm Americans. And it's another thing altogether to watch it unfold up close and personal. And yet another to actually document the insidious but effective tactic that is being used to silence and disarm Christians right here in America.
Well, look, I don't consider Catholics Christians.
Okay.
And that, that we're too easygoing with our ecumenical post-Vatican II outlook on spirituality. And so I'm very clear to differentiate somebody's religious outlook. Most religions are in business with the Pope. And there's even the Presbyterians who actually have defended the Irish when Cromwell attacked them because they were working with the Jesuits. They ended up working with the Jesuits themselves. And if it weren't for the Calvinists of North Carolina and Virginia forcing the Bill of Rights on the Presbyterians in the first Congress, we would have been already dissolved without a Bill of Rights in which to keep the government in check. So, look, I think that the religious piece is overdone, and that I don't see many true religious people in the historical sense anymore. I see this as sort of a collective movement, and
we call that religiosity. Religiosity. That's what the churches are practicing. They're practicing basically a religion that ain't real. You know, Jesus told us, you can do what I do and more. I have a feeling that the Council of Nicaea, when they created the Catholic Church, they kicked Jesus upstairs so you and I wouldn't be trying to emulate the kind of man he was.
Well, certainly Jesus was dead at that point, so they could do anything they want. Witnesses, you know, dead men tell no tales. But I wasn't there. I have no. I can only ascertain based upon what I read, and that's a disadvantage. I think that the powers that be are not smart at all, and they're using a roadmap, and certainly Revolution is a roadmap that they embrace, which in itself, I think that, and if you look at the works of Albert Pike, who is the most renowned Freemason in the country, he's got statues in Washington. He was working with Jesuit Father Schmidt, who worked with securing the land for the Mormons out in Utah. That I believe that that there is not much independent action going on. It's prescribed by the various contracts and lasting agreements and alliances that go right back to old Rome, in just the same way as FDR's mother was directly related to the Roman Senate historically. That this country has been constantly under the thumb of Rome, and all of the trappings of Washington and the fact that Washington was built on property known as the 7 Hills and 5 Hills in Washington. It was donated by the Catholic Church. The Carroll family, the first Jesuit provincial bishop of America, John Carroll, went to school with Thomas Jefferson, and Carroll's brother was Charles Carroll, who was one of the richest men in the United States, and was essential in financing the Revolution, with provisos that there had to be certain bowing to their profiteering on the slave trade, which was being run out of Maryland. And that, but it all goes back to that old Roman intent to occupy Jerusalem and to bring, abandon Rome specifically, and to occupy Jerusalem was a necessary ecumenical subservience to one world order. That's who Hitler was. He was subservient to Rome.
Now, didn't Hitler use that double-headed eagle also? I mean, weren't the bankers working right hand in glove with Hitler too? They always financed both sides. They both, and I'm not sure that we fought on the right side. You know, we fought on the side of 3 communist countries opposed against my ancestors, the Germans.
Well, I think it's important to scrap the Hegelian construct of left and right. There is no left and right other than that which was occurring inside of the Duma in Paris during the Revolution. In fact, communism and capitalism was an invention out of the British Museum that didn't exist before the 1840s to 50s. It was an invention. And that the crucial item here was whether or not the individual could make, with free choice, decisions separate from the Holy Roman Empire, and that those individuals who would get out of line were put to death or enslaved or made miserable through being banished as a prisoner to some slave program. I see the problem as not left and right. I see the problem, and not communist capitalism. I see the problem